Hello, Author Nation, and welcome to another podcast from, I guess it's sunny. It's just freezing cold, Austin.
It's sunny and it's like 18 degrees or something.
Crazy.
I apologize for my city.
Well, you were one of the few crazy enough to come out and drive around in this mayhem.
Well, it was bonkers because, I mean, again, Texas, you're not supposed to worry about snow, but we woke up to straight up snow. There's a hill right in front of our house. We actually there's a runway in our backyard. And so planes taking off all the time, totally just covered in snow. Like the hangars are all covered with snow. And the whole street's iced. So I couldn't leave. And then I was about to leave, and I'm about 40 minutes away with no traffic. I'm about to leave, leaving an hour, and holy shit, right as I'm about to leave, we get an alert that the two streets I need to leave there's accidents everywhere, and it's just black ice. And I'm like, okay, well, as long as my wife didn't see the alert, I'm good.
That's for other people.
And then outside, a car's like fishtailing right in front of our house, like trying to get down the road. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have to be a little bit late. But it cleared up, and I had no red lights on the way here. It was the most beautiful drive. It is sunny.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's just freezing.
It is cold. Yeah, it's good we came up to the room because it's actually that lobby is...
I'm way more comfortable. I needed to wear my parka now.
I know, it was freezing. So you should introduce yourself for the few people that don't know who you are. And
I'm Ray Romano. Not really. I'm Ray's younger, giddier brother. I'm Sean Platt. I have no association with Ray Romano whatsoever.
So we got to meet for the first time at Author Nation. And
Author Nation was wonderful. So I disappeared, 5 years ago. I just got insulated. I just wanted to build the story studio that we were building and really focus on the storytellers that we had there. And we were transitioning from publishing, which had become very crowded. And it wasn't just crowded in a marketplace sense. I kind of didn't like where it was going. I didn't like how algorithmically driven it was. And there was this great moment where the CEO of Sterling & Stone, Neve, and I were talking several years ago. And we realized that, man, the bigger our KU audience gets, the less connected we felt to our readers, the less we liked the books that we were creating, and just kind of the least we liked the whole game. And we realized that in the history of the universe, no one has ever gone to a buffet because their favorite chef works there. They go there because it's unlimited food and they can be gluttonous.
That's a very interesting analogy.
I just realized we have a whole studio full of, chefs, and we didn't want to make buffet food anymore. And so ironically, a lot of the kind of IP that Hollywood is looking for film and television, it's not found in KU. That they see that as direct to DVD, essentially. The basement. And so we all know Apple doesn't have very much of the market share, a couple percentage points, but they've got like 50% of the prestige, right? If you're not in Barnes & Noble, if you're not in Apple, you don't exist in Hollywood. And so we just made a very specific, strategic, we kind of said, well, let's start ignoring, what does it look like if we ignore the $1 customer and focus on the $1 million customer? Because it's fundamentally a different buyer. We've come full circle, and now we're at more than 40 storytellers in Sterling & Stone, and we do a lot of KU. But it took us a while to get there, and we wanted KU to be an and, not an or, and not the thing that led the business. It was something that was additive. Once we built what we wanted, we could add KU into it instead of, we had just changed to where it was the train that we were all on. And it just wasn't where we wanted to be.
Well, I think that, when I came in and you were kind of coming out, the idea of there was such an opportunity if you were able to tell a story to go in there, get validation, and make money where you could quit, that it was like, it's the obvious place to go. And then what happens is, be careful what you ask for. Like, now you got this, and there's some people today that are really struggling because their whole business is built on that type of customer, which isn't their customer, right?
Right.
You're a provider to a subscription service that has customers.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think that most creators who are fulfilling that, I don't even think they really truly understand their role in that cycle. And making the decision to, okay, we're going to focus on film and television style IP allowed us to take control again. Mm-hmm. And now KU feels like a decision. It's, that's just another marketplace. But also, the content that you create for KU is fundamentally different than standalone novels or IP that is engineered for film and television. It's different. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be structured differently. It needs to be written differently. The voice is different. The tropes are different. The placement is different. And so some storytellers are really engineered to tell those kinds of stories, and some are not. I'm not, actually. I've done my share at KU, and I'm still doing my share of KU as responsibilities to the company, but it's not my favorite thing. Like, I want to tell stories that make amazing limited series, for example. And so that's where I'm really driven. Like, I want to write the next Succession. That's the kind of thing that I want to do. And KU doesn't allow for that. And so what I love about where the industry is going, and a lot of what I saw at Author Nation, was this return to roots and this return to selling direct. And I'm really, really following that compass. I want a relationship with my readers. I love that Johnny's whole new focus is, the artist and author, and how do you connect? And when Johnny was with Sterling and Stone, part of the bristle was that he wanted to go deep and not wide. And it was very difficult for us at the time to champion that because it doesn't pay the bills. KU pays the bills. It's going uphill the other way.
Yeah.
But he doesn't mind going uphill, and I don't either. But you have to think of it as two separate things. You can't use the KU playbook if you don't have KU content.
Sure. Yeah, I never thought about it from the content perspective. My view has always been around like customers, right? Like an obvious mistake you see people make is if they're in KU and they're like, well, I hear a bunch of people are making money on Kickstarter. I went and ran a Kickstarter and I sent an email to all my KU people and they're like, why would I pay that? And it's like, you missed the point. Yeah. Like they're satisfied where they're at. They're the buffet customers. Yeah. You're now trying to open up the test kitchen over here.
Yep.
And you got to look for different people. And by the way, especially, it's really, really hard if you're successful over in the buffet type, that you're starting over and you may only have 10 to 20 people that sign up for your
I'd say do not find a lot of overlap in those audiences.
Which is perfect. That's what you want. Like, if you want everybody, doesn't mean they're all in one place.
But you have to be okay saying no if you want to say yes. If you want to say yes to that thing, it's pretty hard to say yes to that thing with all your heart if you're not also saying no to this thing over here, or you're building the bridges and the mechanisms.
Yeah, I think that's where, stuff that we talk about on Author Nation and that I've always been talking to people about, it's a strategy, right? So like, if you were to say that you wanted to change your business, let's say you're somebody that was 70-80% in KU and you're full-time and it's a lot of your money. Okay, we can get you to where you get other revenue streams from other places. It's going to cost some money to do that. It's going to take some time. You're going to have to treat these people differently, right? So if you are going to go direct, you don't just take all your books out of KU, right? Like, you have to think through the business. You and I are both talking about businesses that have gone sideways on us. Like, don't purposely make it go sideways. But what you could, you can do is say, okay, well, this new series that I'm starting next year will always, the first time the books come out, they'll be direct.
Yeah.
And then over time, they'll come into KU for a period of time. Will you have a large part of your KU audience upset? Yes. Communicate with them.
Yeah.
It's a new model. You will get the books when I decide that my book is worth 0.04 cents a page.
Right.
Not when somebody else does. right?
Yeah, I think going into it with strategy is absolutely the way. And we were way more abrupt than that, because we found out, like, we made the decision to go straight up. So we did have that conversation, Neve and I, where, okay, let's start focusing on the $1 million customer. We need to do this. And it was at a time where we were about to take a 2-week sprint for the company. No meetings, everyone just,
Work.
big nose down, get your stuff done. And Sean stopped talking. And so we were going to take one of those 2 weeks, and this was on a Friday. And I was feeling a lot of agitation at the time, and so was she. And it was specifically around KU. And we had a data guy who was working with us and running a lot of numbers. And so we were making educated decisions for the first time in a few years. Like, we had been very heart-driven before that, and we made a concerted effort to get back in and do things right and make KU work. And we finally made KU work and realized that it kind of sucked. And so it was a box set was the contentious point here, where our data guy said, okay, the best thing that you could do to make money with this product is, we had a great title, a great hook for a thriller series. And he said, instead of putting these out one by one, what you're going to need to do is write the entire series and then make it a box set for 99 cents and get the page reads. And I was like, fuck that noise. Like, there's no, like, the entrepreneur in me is bristling. The creator in me is in the corner crying. Like, no one is happy with this. And like, that was just, I kept thinking that over and over and over, that if the way to make money on this product is a 6-book box set for 99 cents, I actually don't want to make money on the product. I'd rather just not make it. I'd rather go make something else. And so I wanted to talk to her about that. She wanted to talk to me about her own version of the same thing. And so we realized, oh, we actually are kind of done with this business. So let's go with the next phase. And then what happened is, the following Monday, Fat Vampire got a green light. And it was like, okay, we told the universe this is what we wanted. And then not even 3 days later, on the first day of our sprint, the universe is like, okay. And Fat Vampire had been optioned for a couple of years at that point, I think 3 years already. So it wasn't that it got optioned, it was that Universal said, yes, this is actually going to be a show. And the hardest thing about getting any sort of momentum in Hollywood is getting momentum in Hollywood. If you have the first TV show, people will take your calls. So right after that, I got somebody that I really trusted, because I have trust issues with Hollywood. Like, I grew up in Long Beach. Like, I'm in love with the industry, and I also know exactly what it is. So I talked to a friend who I really trusted his litness on people. And I said, hey, I just want to talk to somebody that you trust, that I can ask questions about management. And I liked this guy so much that by the end of the day, we were like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. And the biggest thing was, you have to be wide. If you're not on Apple, we can represent all of your IP, but it really should be wide. So we yanked the cord. Like, we went wide immediately, took everything out of KU, and we expected it to hit us at about 70%, and it hit us 90%, and it was immediate. And so we had to look for other ways to make money, to kind of pay for our IP transition. But I don't have any regrets, but you're absolutely right that our way is stupid. That's slower and more strategic is absolutely the way you do it, because you can turn it into an and instead of an or.
Yeah, well, and I've talked to some of my clients that are, when they're, especially if they're negotiating package deals around their audio and stuff like that. And in circumstances, what their kind of their new strategy is this idea of, like, when they're talking with Audible Studios or Tantor or whoever it might be, that it's like, you need to pay a premium now, because by choosing to go into your system only, I'm foregoing connecting with customers directly.
Yeah.
And there's a lifetime value that I have to discount.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a whole different way of thinking about it. Is like, anytime I choose to not connect with the customer directly to build that relationship, means not only am I missing out on that particular sale, but it could be a lifetime of sales. And what's that worth?
Well, I think that that's the difference between thinking of your work as a story or a book and thinking of it as IP. If I think of my work as intellectual property, then I'm thinking about it longer term. I'm thinking about lifetime value, as opposed to what is KU paying per page this month, which is just like, if I'm ever obsessed with that metric, please put a pillow on my face and just press down.
Well, I put out it was right after COVID. People were talking about what was going on with their revenues, and part of it was people not being stuck inside anymore, but also it's like, they didn't adjust the KU rate.
Yeah.
And inflation went up 20 something %.
Yeah.
So you had a massive discount. So like when I did the math on it, it was like you're getting paid based on 2016 payout. Now you're getting paid like 0.002 cents per page in 2016 dollars, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's been this, discounting they've been doing on you just because of, the price of your milk and eggs has gone up, but they haven't let you raise your price on your per page read.
Yeah.
That's not a winning business long run.
No, it's I don't ever want to play something. I don't ever want to play a game that I don't want to win.
Yeah.
Right. And that is very much that situation. And I think that having more control now when we do KU, it feels additive. It feels like, okay, we're engineering this stuff for KU, and we're also pairing the writers who are engineered to do that. And that's different too. I think a lot of writers just go out and they're just throwing shit at the wall.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time, not just in pre-production to make sure that all of our stuff hits the tropes and the marks that they're supposed to, but that our storytellers are aligned with the stories they're telling. Because what we have found is that most artists are actually in the wrong genres.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so they're producing, most storytellers are producing what they like to consume, not what they're engineered to create. And there is a huge disconnect between those two things. They are not the same.
Tell me more like how you identified that and how you were dealing with it.
Yeah, I have actually a specific story for this. So it was when we were first bringing new storytellers into the fold, and we were getting into romance. And we actually don't do romance at all really now. We have a couple things incubating, but back then it was, this is such a huge market, and we also had a lot of people in our audience that we could specifically draw from. So we brought in somebody who was a romance author, not just like a little bit, like this is what she had done as a career. This is her peer group. This is her entire catalog. She's a romance writer, and we pilot everything. So we're not going to greenlight a series unless we know that it has legs. So we engineered what should have been a forever series, something that could run very, very long in the romance world. And here's the pilot. So we're reading the pilot, and I don't know, it's like a very Malcolm Gladwell Blink thing where all the boxes are checked, but something felt off about it. It wasn't quite right. And so we had a one-on-one with the author and said, hey, like, there's something not quite right here. And before we can go further, we need to figure it out. And so we started talking about, well, what do you like about romance? Well, I really, really love the banter. Like, banter is great. Okay, but Fox and Mulder have banter. That's not a romance. So, but cop shows, yeah, I love cop shows. Okay, I got it. We talked a little bit about what you like about romance. What don't you like about romance? Ugh. Sex scenes. I hate sex scenes. What? Hold on. You can't be a born to write romance author unless you're writing clean romance. And she wasn't. So you can't hate the sex scenes because the reader subconsciously even might feel that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start talking more and more and more. Well, what else don't you like? Ugh. Happily ever after. Okay. Now we have Big Mountain Egg. Huge disconnect. So we're talking more and more and more. And okay, so if you could design your perfect book, what would it be? Well, is there such a thing as like a Jack the Ripper romance? Whoa, no, there is not, but that was illuminating. So it ends up she was born to write thrillers. Like, she was writing the wrong genre for a long, long time. And that was a really big light bulb moment for our entire company. And ever since then, we do something called genre therapy, which is we bring you in and we ask a lot of questions that you've never been asked before. And it's amazing how often people are just writing the thing that they love the most. But that's not. Another really good example is someone who is born and raised on like Star Trek: The Next Generation. They love reading sci-fi, but maybe it's the big ideas they really like, and they're actually can write fantasy really well, but they can't do the techno stuff for sci-fi. So homing in on what somebody is born to write is the best way to get the most out of them, because it's just fluid for them. Same thing with, it's not just the genre. We make sure that everyone is operating in their zone of excellence or genius. So we have authors that only draft. They love drafting. If they never have to write an outline for the rest of their life, they are thrilled. And then we have these guys over here who just love outlining. They don't want to draft. They want to see the whole story on a macro level and get it all in there. So the benefit of having 40 plus people in a studio is that we are all just doing the thing that we're really good at, and we get better work in less time.
Yeah, interesting. So having had your own conference, kind of being the granddaddy of Author Nation, for those that don't know, Smarter Artists was what inspired Craig to do 20 books, and then we took over his contract. So, but what my question is, not to get into the history of all this, is having been to a lot of conferences, a lot of masterminds, being out of the game for a while, what are the big things you see were the changes from then and now?
I almost feel like it's come full circle. I feel like in any industry, you have the people who try and they can't quite make it and they fall off by the wayside. Then you have the people who are just survivors. Then you have the people who are constantly reinventing. And I find that to be really fascinating. I love reinvention. I think this is all about reinvention. And what I loved about Author Nation was the amount of people who were just willing to do the work. Like, they're just willing to do the work. They're willing to think differently. I loved the whole movement towards direct selling and taking more ownership of that author-reader relationship. I felt really inspired by that. Like, I'm like, I want that. Yeah. So I walked away with more grounded inspiration for the things that I wanted to do. But I just loved how many authors were there willing to do the work. And part of the problem with, I mean, this is true in most fields, but I do see it a lot in the author space, is a sense of entitlement. My stuff is great. Why doesn't everybody love it? Well, maybe you're making it more about you than the reader. Or maybe there isn't alignment between what you need to produce and what the market wants. Or there's a lot of things to figure out. Maybe you're not putting enough attention into your craft, or maybe you're too reliant on Facebook ads, or whatever it is. There's always a reason. But I think that if you're a creator who thinks that you're somehow owed success, you go, like, dude, you're walking uphill.
Yeah, I the cool thing is there's nothing to stop anyone today from writing a book and publishing it on the biggest bookstore in the world for the whole audience to see. The problem becomes when you expect to get paid for it.
Yes.
Right. And now it's a two-sided transaction, right? There's somebody that's saying, well, I've got $3.99. What am I going to do with that $3.99? It could just sit in my wallet. It could be spent on your book. It could be spent on all these other books. So that's where I think there is that rub for folks, is like, well, on the first level, are you really doing it for the act of creation? Then at some level that should be good enough.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, it's nice to have the recognition by others. But are you actually getting that recognition? It's just not at the recognition that you want, right? Yeah. It's like, yeah, people are buying your book and reading it. And in the grand scheme of there being 16 million titles out there, you got a pretty significant amount of that market. You've got 0.002% of it, right? But you want to be the top of the game.
Yeah, it's like my mom. Like, my mom has a flower business. We grew up in the flower business, and she loves flowers. but it's a hobby. Like, let's be clear, Mom. For the amount that she's making versus the amount that she's spending in time and energy and going downtown and getting her flowers, and she doesn't price enough, and so with all of these factors, she has a hobby. And that's great if she would just acknowledge that it was a hobby. So when we have these, I talk to my mom every week. And it's always, she's telling me about her business, but she's always telling me how, like, it's not making any money and this or that or the other thing. And the conversation always comes back to, does it need to make money? Because if you just acknowledge that it was a hobby and that you really love, when somebody's buying flowers for their anniversary and you get to be the person who does that, that could be enough. You don't need to think that, like, but she doesn't ever want to be the biggest flower shop in Long Beach. Yeah. That's the difference. You see a lot of authors who they can't get to the other side where I want to be one of the biggest authors in the world. Well, that's hard. In the ghostwriting space, we do a lot of nonfiction books. And you always get this, like, I want Oprah to read my book. Okay, that's delusional. Yeah. Oprah's not going to read your book, right?
Yeah.
So if you go into the conversation with Oprah is like, that's on your wish list, you're probably going to get disappointed.
Yeah.
And if you think that you're entitled to have her read your book, that's a whole different thing.
That's funny you say that. That's, being in the business, I'm sure you get people will come up to you and be like, oh, I'm going to write this nonfiction book. And it's like, when you explain to them how the market really works, it's like, well, why are you writing this book? Well, I've got these really good ideas about financial planning. It's like, you look how many financial planning books are out?
There are a lot.
There's a lot, yeah. What's your expectations? Well, I think it'll be a bestseller. It's like, okay, well, I just want to let you know, on the day that book drops, whatever day that is, there's about 3,000 to 4,000 other books that are dropping that day. Some of those are people that have lists with 100,000 names on their mailing list and have written 50 books and have thousands of pre-orders that are going to release on that day. So your expectations, they're not realistic. Now, could you moonshot this thing? Well, yeah, there's always that story, but that's the outlier.
Yeah, right. It's insane. I had a client who, this was for fiction too, not nonfiction. And he had plenty of money. So he could buy a high quality book and he could pay for a lot of ads and he could do all of the things. And still, he's like, I want this to be one of the biggest books of all time. I want it to outsell the Da Vinci Code. No. Like, no. I need you to look for another ghostwriter because I feel like you're a little delusional.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not earned. You become bigger than the Da Vinci Code by somehow breaking a paradigm, telling a story that has not been told before, or telling it in such a superb way that people cannot stop talking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say his idea was bad. He had a perfectly fine idea, but it wasn't the kind of idea that becomes the next thing.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? As people get their spiritual guru tells them that can be a bestseller or whatever it might be. It's like, well, that's great that he said that, but like, you're writing a book about financial planning.
Yeah.
But that also being said, what is the real reason if you're somebody like that you're writing the book? Because if it's to get your financial planning business busier, that's a great reason.
That's different. But in that instance, you could sell 100 books and be profitable.
Right. Or never sell any and hand them out at,
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the part that people expect both. And it's like that it's kind of like your conversation you had with the author about like, what do you hate about what you're writing? And it's the same kind of thing, walking somebody through those ideas. It's like, what is it? Because you're in the business, you're an excellent financial planner. You've been doing this. You've got enough money. You can spend that money to buy a book. And one financial planning customer has this massive lifetime value. What is the purpose of the book, right?
Yeah, you see in the nonfiction space a lot of chiropractors write books, right?
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense because the moment you walk into the chiropractor's office, if their book is there front and center, well, now you trust them more. You're probably going to spend more on services. You're going to spend you might refer it to a friend because you love it that this famous author is, your chiropractor. So now you're going to recommend it to your Aunt Sally.
Yeah.
Whatever. Right. But that is going into it with a strategic business plan. The book is not about sales. I do not know a lot of nonfiction people who, I mean, what I'm blanking on his name, Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, he's made $23 million on that book, but that's because it is such an outlier. It's a huge, huge juggernaut. Most people, I know a lot of people with nonfiction books who have made a lot of money on their nonfiction books, not on sales. Like book sales are not the mechanism. It's speaking gigs. It's I know somebody who wrote a book based around an app, right? But it's all attention on the app, and now they're getting subscriptions each month.
Yeah.
Based on, instead of a $3 profit on a book.
Mm-hmm. Well, a great example from the show was Drew Davis.
Yeah.
So Drew's written a book, a couple books.
Just as an aside, Drew, I've seen a lot of great speakers. He was my favorite speaker at Author Nation and one of the best speakers I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's amazing. And when we were scouting for somebody, I mean, we were purposely looking for somebody at kind of his level that was going to change. Because you kind of started a lot of these things. So many of the speakers are people that have come up through the idea of their own experience, and they're sharing what's worked and what hasn't. They're maybe not the best speakers. Some are okay. Some are, but to come in and have somebody that isn't from, coming from that layer of necessary of expertise, but expertise and inspiration.
But that's what it needed.
Yeah.
You know what I felt when I was watching Drew was, have you ever watched like a really excellent movie or TV show and you don't know exactly where it's going? You were smart enough to not watch the trailer for it, right? But you're sitting there and within a few minutes you just get this feeling, oh, I'm in the hands of a really great storyteller and I'm excited to see where this goes. So I don't really care where it goes because I'm comfortable now knowing that I'm in good hands. Like, he was 2 minutes on stage and I just felt like, oh, this is great. And I felt immediately better. Not that I didn't feel great already, but I felt better about the entire conference. I was like, oh, this just leveled up.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like Drew leveled the whole thing up because he wasn't coming from the ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, we were getting ready for that presentation. So he went on right after me and we're talking through the handoff and all that stuff. And he's like, I've always sort of gone around saying I'm a best-selling author, but now that I'm here, I have some real imposter syndrome going here. And I'm like, yeah, but you wrote that book for a different reason. Yeah. You're right. You're like,
he wrote that book to get on the stage.
Yeah. And one of the, I've seen him speak multiple times, and we hired him after he did a presentation on how to build a speaker's business, where he talked about, you build that business from this idea of getting stage side leads. That when you're done, you stick around and people come up and say, I want to have you come speak at whatever, which happened with us, right?
Of course.
But that whole idea of thinking through why you're doing all the different parts of your business. They don't necessarily have to be, and this gets back to the whole thing with KU, what is its purpose in the business? What is it to do? And if it's solely just to capture the buffet eaters, that's okay.
Yeah.
But don't try and make your whole business about running buffets unless that's what's going to get you up every morning.
Yep.
So, I think, did you see going back to Drew, did you see his digital doppelganger presentation?
I did. Yeah.
So
I mean, dude, I would have gone to his presentation if it was about reading the menu or the local restaurant. He sold me. I was like, I want to hear this guy talk. I want to be around his energy.
Yeah, and I saw him do that digital doppelganger presentation twice. So I'd seen it 3 times. And we actually didn't give it the service it deserved. It should have had longer time.
Yeah.
At the other 2 places, completely different audiences. Same presentation.
Were the other audiences more receptive?
Well, that was the other thing. We chose to do that as a second presentation strategically. We weren't going to lead that digital doppelganger
Yeah.
one is his number one thing that he's being asked to do right now.
I can imagine that. Yeah.
He did it at Social Media Marketing World. He did it at CEX. But what was interesting, I saw it at both places, different audiences, completely different concept of like how he introduced the story, and it was on brand for whatever. If you were a digital marketer or if you were a creator, then it was the thing that was so interesting to me is how in that period of time, which would have been about 4 months, how much he'd improved the presentation. Not on the presentation skills. He's just he's a consummate professional, but the content that he was bringing in. So
is that because of the evolution of AI in that time?
Well, even just like the idea of between the first time I saw it and the second time, he introduced all that concept around the Lumiere's law and how we apply new technologies in an old way, and like that's fundamentally wrong, and that whole like triangle of conflict he set up, that wasn't when he did it the first time. It was still hilarious and great, and he had Drew Dini and all that stuff, but it was so like. That's the other thing, as in his creative medium as a presenter, is how you see that roll out, and and then for anybody in the audience that has ever had a 1-star review, even Drew got 1-star reviews.
Really?
Yeah, you didn't hear about this?
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah. I made a comment about it somewhere. I couldn't believe that, like. We had people writing us over and over and over and over and over. Like, I've been to conferences my whole life. I've never seen anybody at this level. This is the best, presenter I've ever seen. People are like, my God, you've ruined every presenter in a conference, like all this kind of stuff. And then somebody like one out of 5 stars. What's this business motivation BS? Tell me how to sell more books.
Wow, he did. He like his whole thing on Mystery Box and like.
How about I took a really crappy FreshBooks commercial,
right?
Explained how Ice Road Truckers works, recut the first draft into a more compelling thing. If you can't figure out how to use just that on your books.
Yeah, I actually have used his examples in talking to clients about how they are going to sell more books by embedding mystery boxes in it. Like, I mean, I talked to clients about mystery boxes well before Drew's presentation, but after his presentation, I just felt more fuel to the fire. That's how he basically told an entire room full of people, the number one thing that you can do to sell more books is to stoke curiosity, which is such a fundamental human driver. And I mean, I'm just a little bit bothered by this because
it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, Sean.
First of all, he was a 5-star speaker. If he didn't resonate with you, then maybe give it 3 stars and say, you know what, it just didn't really hit for me, but clearly the quality of presentation was there. So I'm going to average this out at 3 stars. Instead, you have somebody who relies on reviews for a living for themselves too, and would probably get full body chills if somebody gave them a 1-star review. So I just feel like that's the kind of thing where we as creators should look at the way we want to be treated and treat other people that way, and also look at the environment, because clearly that was somebody who had a different message coming from the outside, and that's where the best ideas come from. That's where the intersections that actually move your business forward come from. They don't come from echo chambers, ever.
No. Well, and that gets to kind of a broader thing with the show is, one, what you're actually criticizing isn't something you criticize him about, you criticize us about, because it's really programming.
Yeah.
Like or is it you pick, and this is something that I think we really wanted to demonstrate so people can make this choice in the future is like, if you just want to come to a show and see who's ever the latest hot topic and get rah-rah stuff and be like, oh, I can do it, so you can do it too, which is a fallacy. That's called survivor bias, right? The statistics are, if they did it, 999 of you can't, right? But if what you're looking for is that outside influence, challenging convention, thinking about how different pieces come together. That's what we're programming around. And that's what you should rate us on, because we're not just going to give you, yes, we're going to make sure people are vetted, that they say, if they say they sold $1 million worth of books, that they did sell $1 million worth of books, or that the way that they're doing it is, been vetted. But the whole idea that we're just here to get you motivated about your chosen profession.
You're already motivated, or you wouldn't have plunked down for the ticket and the airfare, whatever.
Yeah, or if that's like, if you think you have to buy motivation, like, you're not going to get through. This is not.
No.
Yeah.
KU's a grind.
Yeah.
Somebody to rah you on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like they going to turn into the Sherpa halfway up the mountain. Like, can you motivate me? He's like, dude, I'm carrying the heavy pack.
Yeah.
You paid $50,000 for me to carry your coffee maker up this hill. You made this choice, not me. Right? I don't know. So what are you up to? Why don't you tell folks what you're doing now, and then you can maybe roll into where they can find you if they're interested in that.
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm in an interesting place where Sterling and Stone is in kind of a sweet spot right now, where we're getting back into heavy publishing, but we're also selling a lot of stuff to film and television and movie and IP that way. Hollywood spent all last year licking its wounds from the strike, and the temperature in the industry seemed to be, this is a direct quote from many sources, survive until 25. And it was a hard year in the industry, but the lights really started to come back on at the end of the year, and things are going well there. And I stepped aside I'm still very much involved, but the company runs well. It has a CEO, Neve, and a COO, Shep. And so I started something called Story Merchants, which is basically for authors who want to make more money and for entrepreneurs who want to make more money, with the common denominator being storytelling. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a story game, you're leaving a lot of money on the table.
Oh yeah.
And that tends to be I identify as an entrepreneur, I think, more than I identify as a writer. And so it's fun to, like, in my entrepreneurial circles, I've always been the dude who's like, hey, you can tell these better stories and it helps your bottom line. Your emails are better, your open rates are better. Everything is better if you anchor it in good story. So I'm spending the next several months just kind of building that. And we have a Incognito is a little suite of ghosting companies that we have, where we do everything from memoir to business books, AI assisted on the lower end, and white glove perennial sellers on the top end. And then in Sterling and Stone, we do ghosting for fiction. A lot of, like, any authors who have, like, their golden handcuff series where they're just kind of sick of writing them and they want to go on to other things, we can just take over, because there is a nice little market for that. People who are just, I don't really want to do this anymore, but I really don't want to stop making the money on it. Where we can adopt any voice. And so that's kind of a fun, sweet spot, because we have 40 plus storytellers that can fulfill it at any time. And it's really win-win, because the storytellers get to eat over here, and we already know that this person over here is going to be able to monetize on their work, where it's a lot harder if somebody's coming in for book one on a fiction series and saying, I would like to be a millionaire author. Well, that's not really how it works. But if you already have a series that's doing really well, having us take it over is very straightforward.
Yeah, it's interesting how there are some repeatable models when you have all those pieces in there. Yeah. It's just, but if you miss one of those pieces, it's like, right, this is established IP.
Yes.
We're continuing on. We can keep it going because you've got that audience. I have a client that does a lot of co-writing, and we're talking because he's repeatedly gotten people to 6 figures co-writing with him. But he's got this audience that he knows what they want. He gives them all the premise. And what's also true is we've seen 2 things that always screw that up. If you go off of the premise that he's developed, that's a killer. or if you quit hitting the repeating of the book, because he's built that business on people that like long series. So like if you suddenly quit, even a 2-3 week gap could be costing you 30% of your revenue.
Yeah, and I think it's a great situation because it also takes the emotion out of it. You're not working with other. I mean, we are creative, so you are working with other creatives, but it's a business transaction.
Yeah.
So it's hey, we're gonna hit your deadline because we want to cash the check, right? Like it's very, very straightforward, and we tend to attract awesome people. So I love that. I say this all the time, and it is so cheesy. Before I say it, I know how cheesy it is, but I don't know. Our tagline for our company is "We change the world with stories." So you can't get cheesier than that. But I mean that too. But I love saying, of all the things that I write, my favorite thing to write in the world is a win-win scenario, and I really, really believe that if you can create a situation where the other person is like, how am I getting away with this? But both people feel that way. That's amazing. And so that's a good example of that situation.
Yeah, I think that we were talking about this earlier over lunch, is the kind of just the, how are you coming into the industry, just of a general motivation. Are you feeling like there's a finite amount of stuff that you're fighting over, or are you seeing that like, hey, there's this really cool big playground we can all build together, and one's additive, the other one's reductive.
Yeah, I am always, I don't believe in competition. I believe in co-opetition.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm always going to attract the people who are into my shit. And so I just need to be the best at being me. And that's all that matters. And I feel like if more creators really leaned into that, and the algorithms are hard. KU teaches us to not be like us. It teaches us to be like that guy over there.
Yeah, what they think is going to sell.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to understand, is when you can find that balance. Again, it was what we were talking about earlier, is like, what you want to do. You don't have to get paid for that hobby. Awesome. Can you find it where somebody's willing to pay you for some of that, or all, now you've got something.
Yeah.
Right. Does it mean some compromise? Maybe. Probably.
Usually.
All right, man. Well, it's great having you on the show.
Thank you.
Next time I come here, I expect 60 degrees or warmer.
That's fair. I should actually mention to anyone listening to this might be interested. I feel like it's an oversight. Dave and I are running the Right Publish Repeat podcast now. We're a few months into that. You can find it on YouTube and all the podcast things. It was supposed to be Dave's show, and I was going to be a very occasional guest, and he has roped me into being the co-host every week, and so we're just back with the podcast. But we're going into month 3, so it looks like it's a real thing now.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you in November.
Oh yeah, for sure. I already bought my ticket. I bought it as soon as the pre-sale went out, because it's some of the best money I'll spend this year.
Awesome. All right, man. Good having you on the show.
Pleasure.